Welcome to Silver Bar Stacker, folks. I hope everybody's doing well and enjoying their Sunday. That's right, folks. Today is Sunday, and we've got a very exciting and interesting one for you today, folks. Now, today we're actually going to be talking about a very useful topic for any silver stacker, and that topic has to do with the size of the silver bars or rounds or coins or whatever type of silver it is that you're stacking. So when we talk about the size, we talk about any size. I mean, there's fractional stuff out there, but I'm going to be setting fractional stuff aside because I kind of put that in a separate category of sort of just collecting rather than stacking. And I personally am of the opinion that you really can't stack fracks. I mean, you can collect fracks and you can say that you're stacking fracks, but ultimately if you're stacking fracks, you're kind of just collecting fracks, because when it comes down to it, the premium that you have to pay for fractionals is so high, and it's very, very difficult to kind of recover that premium when you are in most traditional settings. Now, when you are selling P2P, that's a different story, right? Fractionals can be a different ball game when it comes down to selling P2P, because you can actually recover your premium back, and sometimes you can even recover more, because that's sort of a collectible market, like I say. And so vintage silver sort of also falls into that same sort of category of sort of collectibles. And so while it is hard to justify, a lot of people will argue, no, you can't even stack vintage. Well, some would argue that you can stack vintage, right? Sometimes you would be able to stack multiple of something, and then that in and of itself, that act of stacking multiple things would be called stacking. And so sometimes you can stack fracks and sometimes you can stack vintage. And so what we're going to talk about today is about what are the different types of practically priced vintage bars and rounds that you can kind of stack, and what are the pros and cons of some of the larger denominational things like 100-ounce bars, and what are some of the pros and cons of some of the smaller denominational things like 1-ounce rounds and bars, right? And we'll even cover things in between, such as 10-ounce bars, right? And so I have a nice sampling of 100-ounce bars, 10-ounce bars, and 1-ounce rounds here in front of us, because I wanted to talk specifically about these different types that you see in front of us. And so we're going to be talking a little bit generally speaking about the size of the silver that you're purchasing, but we're also going to be talking specifically about the pieces that we see here in front of us. And one of these pieces that you see here in front of us, actually these 10-ounce bars that you got in front of us, they're actually a topic that was discussed very recently on our friend Silverstruck's channel. Now, Silverstruck is one of my favorite channels to watch. I said this last week, and in fact last week's episode was dedicated to him, and I thought we should dedicate this episode to him as well, at least partially. And so I thought I would break out the same bar that he covered on his channel last week, which was the 10-ounce commercial style pressed Engelhard bar. Now, this is a Canadian style Engelhard bar of the 10-ounce variety, and it is a pressed finish bar. Now, the pressed finish bars are going to typically be the more readily available bars. They're going to be kind of your more reasonably premiumed bars, especially when you're talking about the US variations of Engelhard bars. Now, when you're talking about the US variations of Engelhard bars, you got a lot of different 10-ounce variations. You got the Eagle design, you got the E logo design, and you've got a couple of those chunky machine finish. They're actually got a smaller face, and they've got a little bit more girth to them. I call those the chunky machine finish bars. There's a couple variations, a few actually variations of those. So those are going to be the more common Engelhard press bars of the US variations. But when it comes down to the Canadian style, this is going to be your most common. And when it actually comes down to this, most common is a funny word, because actually this Series 2 Engelhard Canadian style 10-ounce bars actually only have 5,000 minted bar estimated according to allengelhard.com. Now, you see here that I have quite a few of them here in front of me, and that's because I like to stack these particular bars, right? And so one thing that Silverstruck did actually cover on his video when he was covering this particular bar, and this is actually a similar bar to the one that you saw on that channel if you did happen to see that video, and if you didn't, I suggest you go watch that video. But regardless, in that video he showed you a very similar bar to this. I believe this is the Series 2, and I think there's like 4 different variations of this Canadian style bar. One of them is a very rare, I think, 100 minted, something like that. Another one is like a first series. So there's like a first series and a third series. Those are quite rare. And then there's 2 different types of the second series. And so this is one of the types. And the only difference between the 2 different second series types is that in this bullhead logo here, there's no dot. Whereas there's another variation, and this one in my experience is a little bit harder to come by, it has a dot inside the middle of that bull. So that's kind of the only difference, And then they'll also fall in different serial ranges. Perhaps these ones are kind of an earlier variation with the dot, and then they kind of remove the dot later on. And so this right here, you can see there's nuances behind the different bars. The mintages estimated mintages are actually the same on these, even though I find that these ones without the dot are actually a little bit easier to find. And I've actually had to pay a slightly higher premium for the ones with the dot, because I'm like, don't have too many of these, so when I see them, then I like to grab them, right? And then to me, the price doesn't matter as much for this, because when it comes down to it, these are vintage, and for me, it's kind of like a collectible first and then stacking second. To me, the price matters a little bit less, and the desire to collect something in particular means a little bit more, and I'm willing to kind of pay the premium for that as a collector, right? And so that's kind of the difference here when you're talking about stacking versus collecting. When you come down to vintage, you kind of have to think about both sides of the coin, right? You got to stack something that you like, but you also got to think about the premium as you always do, right? And so in thinking about the premium, it's easy to think about that when you're buying, right? You kind of know what the going rate is, at least if you're doing your research, for a typical, 10-ounce single hard bar, or a 100-ounce single hard bar, or a 1-ounce single hard bar round, right? And especially when you're looking at the random design listings, then that's going to be your most favorable premium when it comes down to the bars and rounds that you're purchasing, right? If you go buy a random year Prospector, that's going to be more favorably priced than any specific year Prospector, probably, right? Like here I've got a tube of 1987s, and for whatever reason 1987s are selling for quite a bit. I mean, this last week I sold a couple 1987s on auction for over $50 a round, which is kind of crazy, because sometimes I'm not even selling the rounds as not on auction, just as I'm offering people to buy them for less than $50 generally, so a lot of the times, and in the very recent past. Yet people see a very specific round, they like the condition of that round, and so they're willing to pay over $50 for it. And that's kind of quite a lot for a Prospector round that's not a 1983 key date. Now I know in 1987, and this can be found on the All Engelhard website, and also based off of my experience from sifting through thousands and thousands of Prospector rounds, the 1987 is kind of like a semi-key date. It's the second hardest to find after the 1983, but it's nowhere near as hard to find as the 1983. And so the 87 has never really historically been priced anywhere near the 83, but I've in the recent past seen the 83, which used to sell over $100 a round, kind of fall down in price in the recent past, and I've seen those auctions closing below 100, and I've seen the 87s kind of bump up, and I've almost seen, I haven't seen them merge, but I've seen the 87s pushing close sometimes on auction to the 83s, which is mind-blowing actually. And this is a crazy phenomenon, because when you're talking about what the auctions are closing at currently for like an 87 between the $40-$50 range, I mean, they were priced at just like all the other years in the very recent past, meaning in the low 30 range. The 82s, the 83, not the 83s, the 82s, the 84s of both reverses, the 85s, the 86s, all of those were kind of selling in the low 30 range, and now they're all kind of like a little bit higher, but especially the 87s are, and then even the 86s kind of shot up a little bit there for a little while. So it's kind of funny how the 1 ounce denomination sort of is a lot more volatile in price when you're looking at it on the secondary market. Now that secondary market price is only the price you should be looking at if you are the type of person that is selling P2P. So you really have to think, as a buyer, you also have to think about yourself, who you are as a seller and how you are going to be selling, right? If you ever have to sell, or if you ever do sell, right? So when you're selling, right, there are multiple avenues to sell. And so if you're just the type of person who needs to do his or her weekly or monthly or annual dump at the LCS, well then you have to rely on just the melt value, because most LCSs will not care about whatever numismatic value is attached to the piece that it is that you're holding. So to them, any Prospector realm will just be an ounce of silver, right? Whereas if you're selling P2P, or you're selling to like a specialized dealer like SBS, for example, they would then in turn probably pay you a premium. the reason we would pay a premium for that is because we sort of specialize in these products. We are regularly have an understanding of the market price for these particular items. We know what we can regularly and reliably sell them to our customers who are specifically seeking out these things for. And so we have a very good understanding of the market value, and we're comfortable paying a slight premium and taking on that added risk and to pay out somebody who may be wanting to sell some of these types of pieces, right? So in that sense, as a seller, as somebody who is selling your vintage, you would think that P2P is going to be a better avenue, right? I mean, I see many people in the YouTube community doing these P2P types of sales, and it is very, very favorable for their bottom line when it comes down to needing to sell, when you're selling out of need, to do a P2P, especially if you're holding on to collectibles. When you're holding on to generics, sometimes you may or may not even come out ahead, because the LCS will give you kind of what the expectation is even on the P2P market. And so it's a lot more easy sometimes to go do that LCS if you're dealing with generics, right? So that's a consideration when you are dealing with vintage in general. But what we specifically came here to talk about was the actual denominations that we're dealing with when it comes down to vintage. Now, I covered 1 ounce rounds and I covered 10 ounce bars. We haven't talked quite a bit about 100 ounce bars yet, but I haven't also covered all the information I wanted to cover around the 10 ounce bars and the 1 ounce bars and rounds, right? So I did kind of cover around the 1 ounce. One of the kind of cons or pros you could look at, it depends on how you look at it, is that it's very volatile in price and that it goes up and down quite a bit on that secondary market. So if you're the type of person who's selling P2P, then that kind of matters, because if you can get a good price on this, then sometimes the market value could outpace the actual value, the melt value that's attached to the thing quite a bit more than let's say something like a 100 ounce bar or a 10 ounce bar, right? And so if that volatility can sometimes work out in your favor if you're selling P2P, and on the flip side, as a buyer, when you are buying, it can also bite you in the ass. The 1 ounce variation stuff can bite you in the ass in that sense as well, because when it comes down to it, if you're the type of person who's going to do that LCS dump, but you're also the type of buyer who's going to pay the premium for the vintage, that's going to bite you in the ass in the sense that, hey, if you're only going to stick to, stacking tubes of 1 ounce rounds and bars, well, guess what's going to happen? You're paying the highest possible premium for that 1 ounce denomination outside of fractional, right? And fractional is not stacking, like I said before. And so if you're stacking 1 ounce bars and rounds, that's fine, all well and dandy. And, if you're doing it for the love and, ultimately your plans are just to keep it forever. You never want to deal with it. You don't care what happens and who has to get rid of it or anything like that. You don't care about the liability aspects of that smaller denomination and how it's valued the same as larger denominational stuff for the most part, to most traditional dealers. Well, fine and dandy. But that's a consideration, and as a buyer, you're going to have to pay an elevated premium for that. Now, when it comes down to 1 ounce denomination stuff, I'm going to speak just quite frankly right now on the website, the SPS website. I don't believe we have anything priced under $33 an ounce. Right now, I know you could probably go on eBay or somewhere else and probably find, an ounce of silver shipped to your door. Everything after all is said and done, it might even be less than $30 out the door with shipping and everything. Right, that's very, very possible. It might be something maybe a little bit more generic, but it's definitely possible to find that. Now, we kind of specialize in collectibles on the SBS website, and so the cheapest thing that I'm thinking of right now, I wouldn't say it's a generic product, but it's kind of these Germania Mint cast poured 4/9 fine silver bars. Those come kind of factory sealed, and so they have like a security sticker on the back with a serial number. So they've got some additional layers of value added to it, that add an elevated premium to them, and so that's kind of why that's not priced below $30, because of all those extra layers of value. But those layers of value can be looked at as liabilities as well, in the sense that you're paying an extra few bucks for something that you're not going to be able to recover when you dump it at the LCS. But when I'm talking about the SBS website in particular, that's actually the cheapest product that I just mentioned. That's the cheapest product that we currently have on our website when it comes down to the 1 ounce denomination stuff. Right? We've got things that you could buy that are cheaper, but the price per ounce cost is not cheaper on that fractional stuff. You can get stuff for cheaper than $33 on the website that's fractional, but it's not going to be a better value when you look at it at a per ounce cost, right? But when I'm talking about the cheapest possible 1 ounce bar around that we have on our store, it's actually $4.9 fine, which is a nice added layer of value, and all the other things that I mentioned are added layers of value, but that's like on sale right now for $33. So that's kind of the floor when it comes down to 1 ounce denomination, $33. Now if you go to some LCSs, I don't know what the price of silver is right now because I don't really pay very close attention to it because it really doesn't impact anything that I do, but I have a slight understanding of what it is, and I do believe, just from watching Salve Metal and some other channels and just from my general knowledge, I do know that it recently had an uptick in price or whatever, and I don't know if that's causing hysteria or not. I haven't really been able to tell, honestly. We kind of had pretty strong sales for the most part for the past several months, I would say, so I haven't really noticed if that has had an impact on sales per se, but I have heard that the price has kind of gone up, so I would estimate maybe it's around $25 or something like that. Okay, so you got the price of silver at $25, and then you got the cheapest item on our website at $33. That's the floor for your 1 ounce. You've got a $8 variance there in premium. That's an $8 premium that you're paying. And I'm not saying this to make you depressed or badmouth my own website about how expensive it is. It's not expensive. It's all relative, right? It depends on what you're talking about. I'm saying that because I'm saying if you're buying anything on the SBS website, you have to kind of consider when you're turning around and selling it, right? Hopefully it's not, you're not turning around next month and selling that to your LCS, because you would have definitely just lost $8 per ounce there. At the very least, right? So there's many things on our website that are much more expensive than that, especially when you're talking about the 1 ounce variation. I've got things that are in the thousands of dollars per ounce, right? And so that's clearly just a collectible and not a non-stacking thing, but when it comes down to it, that's something that you would definitely get burned up your butt if you tried to sell it to the LCS or something like that, right? And so you really have to be careful, mindful, because there's an endless rabbit hole of stuff that you can collect in any size variation. So when it comes down to the 1 ounce variations of bars and rounds, I think you have to be very, very careful in that sense, right? And then you also have to be very knowledgeable, and you have to do your research as well, because let's say, for example, these 87s that I was talking about and that are selling for like 50, right? That's quite a bit of money compared to what our probably cost basis is on those. And had somebody, bought several months ago, several tubes of 87s, and now they're in hard times, and now they need to auction off a couple, they might get a significant premium above what they paid for that. And so, timing is actually good. It's good to kind of do your research on the market, kind of know what you're talking about, or not know what you're talking about, but know what you're purchasing before you purchase it. And even after you purchase it, it's good to do your research. Now, these rounds that you see here in front of me here are quite low premium rounds. These are also one of the lowest premium items that I have on my website. And this is going to be a Monex. I've got these in these Ziplocs because they're very good condition. These are these Monex Silver Eagles. These are 1982 dated Monex Silver Eagles. They do not have an RCM mint stamp on them. These were also produced by RCM, but from my research, these are actually produced by the USVI Ingot Company, who is the same company that has produced those crazy board rounds, those chunky stacker bars. And so those particular items sell at quite a premium. The chunky stacker bars and the USVI poured rounds in particular sell for quite a premium. These rounds, not so much. You can get these rounds quite easily. I'm not sure what the mintage is on them, but I'm assuming it's quite high because they're quite readily available rounds. But based on my research, they're Monex, and they were initially produced by USVI Ingot Company until the production moved over to Royal Canadian Mint. And I had, actually, he's a supplier of mine, recently reached out to me asking me about these particular rounds, right? And they were saying, these are pretty reasonable price, but they didn't realize that they were produced by USVI Ingot Company. And so I said, yes, they are. Based on my research, they are. Here's my source, blah, 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 blah. And I explained that I felt that they were. I felt that there were some other products that USVI Ingot Company produced, and they were kind of blown away by that because typically USVI Ingot Company products sell for very, very high premiums. And I think the reason that these don't is because they're, one, readily available. The pricing is quite reasonable actually on the secondary market, at least for now. And I think it's probably because maybe a lot of people don't know that USVI Ingot Company actually produced those, right? And so this individual said, I kind of bit myself in the butt when I told people that, hey, those thick font Johnson Matthey 5 gram bars are only 5,000 minted. The second he told somebody that, he was able to sell one of those bars apparently for $75, and after that he had trouble finding them for a reasonable price. So he said, I should not tell people about this information that I find out. So he found this information out for me about the USVI ingot company producing these particular rounds, and he said, I'm going to try to stockpile these for the next 6 months. And then maybe I might tell people, because right now the prices are reasonable. And I said, not a bad idea. That's probably a good solution, since you kind of bit yourself in the butt with the 5 gram Johnson Matthey bars that you were kind of looking to stack lots of, I guess. And so I said, I hope you're able to stack as many of those as you're looking to stack, right? Because they are quite easy to stack them right now. So right now, maybe it is, maybe it's not a great time to grab those because they're a reasonable price, as compared to a typical vintage piece. Maybe later down the line, more and more people find out about the supply starts to dry up, then the price starts to go up, then you might come out ahead at least selling those on the P2P market. This type of stuff happens quite a bit, I would say, with the 1 ounce variation stuff, and that price does not always go up. Many times the price kind of fluctuates down. Like I gave you an example of the 1983s. I used to sell those quite a bit with quite ease at around 125, and prices kind of gone down a little bit in the recent past. Market kind of got flooded with a little bit of those, and the auctions I saw started closing a little bit lower, and now I see them kind of readily available under $100. So that's an example of something where the collectible piece decreased in value. That's why I say it's not just all fun candy and roses. It's like a higher risk thing, buying the 1 ounce denominational stuff when it comes down to a resale perspective, because the price fluctuates quite a bit more, and it is less tied to spot prices. The point that I would like to make about the 1 ounce variation stuff. The 1 ounce variation stuff is the least tied to spot price compared to the 10 ounce and the 100 ounce variation stuff. 10 ounce stuff, you can actually get 10 ounce bars for a pretty good price, especially if they're the more kind of common commercial variation bars when it comes down to Engelhard or even JM. Those pressed bars are quite reasonably priced when it comes down to like a typical vintage bar price. Now I know Engelhard and Johnson Matthey demand a little bit higher of a premium, but a lot of those rarer, more obscure refiners have very, very rare bars, and sometimes those sell for quite a bit more than your typical Engelhard or JM bar, many times, depending on the refiner. And when you're talking about pressed versus poured, I would say that pressed bars, especially of the 10 ounce variation, at least if they're the more common ones, will sell at more digestible premiums. A lot of times those poured 10 ounce Engelhard bars, and especially those odd weight Engelhard poured bars, they sell at ridiculous premiums and very, very undigestible premiums. And so that comes, just like the 1 ounce stuff, comes with a lot more risk, because now you're paying quite an elevated premium for something that looks pretty, but how will you recover that if you're forced to sell to the LCS, or if that's the only option that you have, etc., right? So the 10 ounce variation stuff is more tied to spot. So it's something, in my opinion, as a buyer, you don't want to pay too high of a premium on it, because when you turn around and sell it, these things especially these things are definitely treated just like bricks of silver that they are, right? They are treated just like the melt value of that silver that they are from many typical stores. Okay, so that's something to consider when it comes down to the 10 ounce and the 100 ounce. People say, oh yeah, you should stack nothing but those big things, you just only care about how close it is to spot. And that's true, because that reduces your risks very much. It reduces your risk quite a bit. If you're only paying like a couple bucks above spot sometimes for a 100 ounce bar, well, guess what, you're probably only going to be selling it for around spot, or a couple pennies above spot, or maybe a couple pennies below spot anyways, right? So you're not really losing out too much. The most you could lose is that $2 premium that you spent, really, at the end of the day. Whereas on the 1 ounce variation, there's not anything available oftentimes for just a couple dollar premium. You get what I'm saying? 10 ounce, it's kind of like a healthy balance, a lot of people like to say. Now, I would say, and this is something that other YouTubers that are in this community that I'm quite good friends with that would also say, because they like to stack the 100-ounce bars and the larger big boy bars. One thing they like about these 100-ounce bars and these larger bars is that you can pick up some nice rare stuff. Now, these bars that you see here in front of us, these 10-ounce bars, they're 5,000 minted. You know, quite a rare bar, honestly, for a 10-ounce bar. Some of those other 10-ounce commercial style United States Engelhard bars are in the 300,000, 400,000, you know, minted range, and so that's even more common. So the premiums are quite reasonable on these types of bars, right? Because they're not very rare. You get what I'm saying? The rare 10-ounce bars do sell at quite a bit of premium. Now, when we talk about these 87 Prospectors, what are those selling? About 40, 50 bucks? That's quite a bit of a premium compared to you know, I don't know, like a 300. I don't know. I sold last I sold one of these for like 325, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which is a pretty damn good price. I regularly sell them for about 350 to 375. So that's a $37 an ounce, $35 an ounce premium for the 10-ounce bar. That's kind of rare. I mean, I would sell like a more common Engelhard 10-ounce press bar probably right now around $300 to $325. So that's like a $30 to $32 an ounce premium. Whereas this 87 is going to be a $40 to $50 premium. And if you even go for the more common dates, it's going to be $30 to $40 premium. So you're paying a larger premium here for that 1 ounce, and so people will say that, oh, you know, all you should care about is that premium that you're paying above spot. But P2P market, these things will fetch you more. You have to pay up for them more, but they'll also fetch you more on the P2P market. These ones, a lot of times won't, right? Depends on the style, right? 100-ounce bars, the big boy bars, as I like to call them, as AU Addict likes to call them, and he loves the 100-ounce bars. Reason for that is because you can get some very rare bars. Now, I got some of these bars that you see here in front of me up on auction. You know, some of them, I mean, all of them have a lot of interest because they're nice Engelhard bars, honestly. Most of them have there's a reason why they're very cool. You know, they're not just a common, none of these are just common bars. Let's just put it that way. Some of them might be high mintage, but they're all very special Engelhard 100-ounce bars. Now, there are a lot of very common Engelhard 100-ounce bars, but in my opinion, there all special. But these are very special, and I can kind of go through why they're all special. But you know, even this bar right here that you see here in front of us is a very common bar. You see a lot of these bars actually. It's one of the most common 100-ounce Engelhard bars that exist. A lot of those bars are melted down though, so any 100-ounce Engelhard bar is special in my opinion. But this one in particular is a very common one. I think it's like 375,000 minted. This is a pretty common bar. I'm sure there's much fewer surviving examples than 375,000, but it's still pretty. You see them pop up from quite a bit of time. I got one of these on auction right now. It's already got a bid. It's bid up right now to $2,725. That's $27.25 an ounce right now. It might even close actually a little bit higher. And you know, I think there's exact style of bars available for cheaper, and so it's interesting that it has a bid already at $2,725. Because that's a premium above what someone could get this exact same bar for. Why though are they willing to pay that extra, whatever it is, $100 extra premium, and it might even close for higher than that? Why would someone pay that extra few $100 for that 100-ounce bar? Why would they pay that extra premium? Well, sometimes it depends on more than just the silver value, especially when you're dealing with collectibles. The serial number matters. Does it come in the original packaging? That matters. The condition of the bar matters. Does it have toning? That matters, right? Are there any errors on it? That matters. Is it pressed or poured? That matters, right? So this bar in particular, yeah, it's a common 375,000 minted bar, but someone's already willing to pay $2,725 plus shipping for it because, take a look. I mean, I'm just guessing this is why. It's a cool bar, man. Check out that serial number, P717177. Very cool. It's also in the original box. So I can see why somebody would pay a slight elevated premium, because the other bars that I see like this don't have a cool serial number like that. Don't come in the original box, right? So that box, yes, it's just plastic. There's no silver value to the box, but you know, it's cool, right? And people like collectibles because they're cool. So sometimes, at least on the secondary market, at the LCS, they may not care, right? But on the secondary market, things like that might matter, right? So a bar like this that is seemingly so common and so high mintage, 375,000, still sells for $2,725 plus, right? I have other bars on auction too that are rarer than that are lower mintage than that I'm trying to sell at the same price, yet they have no interest. I mean, it's not that they don't have interest. There are many people watching this and interested in potentially bidding on this, and they may bid on it before it closes. But this is like a 15,000 minted W series bar. It looks very unique because it's got kind of this unique finish, because these W series bars were produced at the California facility in Anaheim, California. So these Engelhard bars are very different than any other Engelhard bar that exists. The W series bars come in the 10 ounce variation as well as the 100 ounce variation. So this is a 100 ounce example of a W series bar. They have a W prefix and they have a very unique looking finish, and this one's got some crazy sick pour lines. So this exact bar is actually up for auction at the exact same starting bid price as this 375,000 minted bar, and this has no bidders on it yet. This bar has no bidders. This bar already has bidders. And this is crazy more rare. It's also a poured bar, which is typically more desirable, yet someone's interested in this and not in this. It's because of the serial number, I'm assuming, and the original packaging, right? So the market value is not all the same. Here's another bar. I believe it's this bar, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's not this bar. Perhaps it's this bar? I don't know. Yeah, this has got a waffle back. It's a waffle back bar. 100 ounce waffle back Engelhard bar. That's pretty uncommon. I mean, I see waffle back 10 ounce bars. That's a little common. I rarely have seen a waffle back 100 ounce bar. And this is something that I'm trying to sell for a starting bid of $29.95, I believe, something like that. Around $30 an ounce. And there's some interest. There's very little interest. Only a few people interested even at that price, right? Whereas there's dozens of people interested on both of these bars. So the premium matters, right? That extra $300 that I'm looking for on that because of the waffle back, well, people ain't having it. They don't want it, right? And so this one may not even get any bidders. Maybe I might have to reduce the price. Maybe I might have to sell it a different way. Maybe I might just have to sit on it for myself because I don't want to sell it for less than that, right? Whereas this bar, much more common, has interest. So what people are willing to pay on that secondary market, on the P2P market, it doesn't just have to do with mintage. It might have to do with other factors as well. And who is purchasing it matters, right? On the P2P market, you might be able to get different types of premiums for these 100 ounce bars, but typically when you're talking about a local coin shop or any store, I mean even our store, typically we would not buy back 100 ounce bars for a very high premium, because the customers of ours that look for them, they're either looking for extremely special bars, like some of the bars that you see in here in front of us, like this bar in particular. This is a 100 minted bar. 100 minted. It's got a large plus on it, and because of that, it's a 100 minted bar. Crazy, right? And I mean, this bar right here, this is a waffle back and a 100 minted bar. I mean, this bar I'm trying to sell for just shy of $5,000, right? So $50 an ounce. I mean, I buy many 1 ounce bars and rounds for well over $50 an ounce. Let me just put it that way. But when it comes down to 100 ounce bars, not so much. I mean, it's very rare that I would pay $50, let alone $40 or even $30 an ounce. I mean, I struggle to pay more than $30 an ounce for a 100 ounce bar, but I mean, this bar in particular is very special to me because it's a 100 minted bar and it's a waffle back. So I wouldn't let this go very easily personally. I'd rather just keep it than let it go for too low, because it's too special of a bar for me, right? This bar as well. I mean, I'm not even sure on the mintage of this bar. I don't have it listed for sale at all either, but I like this bar quite a bit because it's a nice Canadian style bullhead logo version, and I really like this bar quite a bit, and I don't have very many of the Canadian style 100 ounce bars, right? So for me, these types of nuances matter, but at the same time, wow, 100 ounce bars are very illiquid. So as a seller, I cannot tie up too much capital in something like a 100 ounce bar. Most local coin shops can't either. They'll have to second guess themselves before they buy your 100 ounce bars back, and people say, yeah, they're liquid, yeah, you'll get the melt value for them, but you're definitely going to get just the melt value for them, and there might be some stipulations attached to that. Like I know one time my local coin shop had told me, hey, if you want to sell these 100-ounce bars, which I don't advise you to do because they're beautiful and we won't give you anything for them, well, we won't be able to get you that money for 10 days, so it'll be a post-dated check. And I was just like, I'm not even interested in selling these bars. I was just curious what you would give them for me, but thanks for that tidbit as well. I definitely wouldn't sell them to you if I wouldn't get my money for 10 days. So, a lot of folks will say, yeah, these, the premium above spot is all that matters. But hey, 100-ounce bars, they're fun. They're fun to stack. They're cheap to stack. They're cheap, they're easy to let go of, without being too sentimentally attached to them. But at the same time, the premium above spot, in my opinion, is not all that matters, right? And you should, as a buyer, also get comfortable with multiple ways of trying to sell your stuff, right? Because I as a seller, I'm also a buyer, right? And so as a buyer, anybody who's a buyer is eventually going to have to be a seller. And so you should consider, okay, how am I going to sell my stuff, right? Especially if you're dealing with collectibles, you really need to consider other possible ways to sell your stuff so that you don't get bit on the ass, you don't get burned too much on that premium that you're paying for that stuff that you love, right? And so that's just kind of what I wanted to talk about when it comes down to considering the different variations of size denominations of vintage that you're purchasing. Size matters, certainly, and the bigger isn't always better is all I'm going to say, right? A lot of times there's a false notion in the stacking community that bigger is always better, lower premium is always better. Not so much. There's something to be said about paying a higher premium for something that's a little bit more liquid. I know very, very many people lined up to buy, reasonably priced tubes of Prospectors. I know very not so many people lined up to buy 100-ounce bars even at the lowest of possible premiums, right? And so that's something to consider, right? Silver is not just silver at the end of the day. A lot of people like to say that, but silver is not just silver at the end of the day. And that saying can be interpreted in many, many different ways is all I gotta say. So thank you so much for joining us here on this fine Sunday. I know it was a very long episode, but it was a very heavy episode as well. So hope you have a great one. If you are able to tune into our Whatnot auction, I do think I would like to get a Whatnot auction going later on today. So be sure to be following us on whatnot.com/user/silver bar stacker. And we will hopefully see you over there later today. You should get a notification once we put it on the calendar, and we should have some auction fun and some vintage and fractional fun auctions and bins galore. So hope to see you there, and if not, we'll see you next week, hopefully on Sunday. Cheers.